For my 30th birthday, I planned everything then. No one showed up. 48 hours later, they had a family trip without me. So I cut off 3 payments. Mom's mortgage, dad's truck and their loan, and finally walked away. My name's Alex. I'm 30 years old, and until recently, I was the kind of guy who'd bend over backward for family even when it hurt. I grew up in a house where love had strings attached and loyalty was expected without ever being returned. My sister Julia always stole the spotlight, and my parents, well, they treated her like the sun and the rest of us like shadows. I was never the golden child. I was the fallback plan, the emergency fund, the invisible backbone. Growing up, I learned early that if Julia wanted something, she got it. If I wanted something, I had to work for it. And even then, it might get handed to someone else. Still, I never really held a grudge. Not at first. I convinced myself it was just how families were, that maybe one day they'd see me, appreciate me. So I worked hard, got my degree, built a small business from scratch. Quiet success, nothing flashy, just enough to be stable and help out when they needed it. And they always needed it. It started with little things. Gas money for dad, a temporary loan to cover Julia's credit card bill, helping mom when the mortgage payments started falling behind after dad's hours got cut. At first, I didn't think much of it. It was family. You help each other. But over time, it became clear the help was expected, never appreciated. The thank yous faded. The calls only came when someone needed something. I told myself they just didn't know how to say it, that they showed love in their own way. That lie got harder to believe every year. I hit 30 this year, and I wanted something simple, just a weekend to feel seen. I wasn't looking for anything grand. Just a few days away with the people who mattered in a quiet lake house I rented 2 hours from the city. I booked it months in advance, sent invites, bought everyone's favorite snacks. I even covered the gas for my parents and offered to carpool Julia and her kids to make it easier. Everyone said they'd come. I spent the whole morning of my birthday prepping the place. Arranged welcome bags in each room, set up the grill, stocked the fridge with drinks, cleaned everything, even though it was already spotless. I checked my phone every 10 minutes, expecting a "we're on our way" that never came. Noon passed, then 2, then 5. By 8, I was sitting on the back deck alone, watching the sunset over the water with 6 untouched steaks in the fridge and a cake that just said, "Happy 30th, Alex." No candles, no singing, just silence. I didn't even cry. That surprised me. I think I'd already run out of tears for them. Instead, I sat there with this numb, quiet understanding. They just didn't care, not enough to even make up a reason. They didn't text, didn't call. They ghosted me like I was a colleague they barely knew. Someone easy to forget. 2 days later, I was scrolling through Instagram when I saw it. Julia had posted a carousel of photos. Family weekend vibes, smiling faces, my parents holding her kids, barbecue on a lake dock. Except it wasn't my lake house. It was a different one. 2 hours in the opposite direction. The date stamp. Same weekend. They'd made other plans together without me. I stared at the photos for a long time, thinking maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe it wasn't this weekend. Maybe they booked it last minute. Maybe there was a mistake. But the captions said it all. So good to unplug with the people who matter most. Nothing like family time. Grateful for our tribe. My name wasn't in a single tag, not one mention of me. I was scrolling through proof that they hadn't just forgotten my birthday. They'd chosen to leave me out of it. And the thing is, I didn't even feel shocked. It was like the final puzzle piece snapping into place. All the times they flaked. All the calls I made that went unanswered. All the times I paid their bills without so much as a thank you. Suddenly it made sense. I was never invited to the party. I was just the guy who paid for it. I didn't respond, didn't comment, didn't message anyone. I just sat in that realization for a full day, letting it settle in like dust after a long collapse. And then I acted. The next morning, I made 3 phone calls. First was to the bank to remove myself as co-signer on the temporary business loan Julia had roped me into 5 years ago. I had the paperwork to show I was the guarantor. She hadn't made a full payment in 7 months, and the risk was starting to hit my credit. I told the bank I'd no longer be held liable, and since she'd defaulted, they could begin collections directly. Second call, Dad's truck lease. I've been covering the payments since last spring, when he'd casually mentioned being a little behind. I stopped the autopay and told the leasing company to forward all future invoices to the primary account holder, him. Last call, Mom's mortgage. This one hurt the most because I truly believed I was doing something good. She'd said the house was nearly paid off and just needed a little help to keep it in the family. So for 3 years, I'd been quietly sending over $1,000 a month to her lender. Never even told my friends. It was supposed to be a gift, an act of love. I canceled the transfer. No announcements, no angry text, no dramatic speeches, just a cold, quiet shift. That night, as I sat on my couch with a leftover slice of birthday cake, my phone buzzed. It was Mom. Her message just said, "Did something happen?" I stared at the screen for a minute before typing back. "Yeah." I finally took the hint. Then I turned my phone over, let it buzz and buzz as calls started coming in. The first call came from Mom. I let it go to voicemail, then Dad, then Julia, one after the other. Like a chain reaction of realization spreading across their little inner circle. Except this time I wasn't part of it. I didn't answer any of them. I just watched the names flash on my screen one after another like ghosts of people I thought I knew. By morning, I had 17 missed calls, 5 voicemails, and a text from Dad that read, "Your mother's in tears. What is going on?" I didn't reply. Not because I was trying to be cruel, but because for once I wanted them to sit in the silence they'd fed me for years. I wanted them to feel what I felt when I was sitting on that empty dock with party lights flickering in the wind, waiting for people who were never coming. Around noon, I got an email from Julia. Subject line, "We need to talk." The body was short, too short for someone who just excluded their brother from what should have been a milestone. "Hey, I didn't know you'd feel so hurt. It was a spontaneous trip. Can we talk?" I read it 5 times. A spontaneous trip with matching shirts, coordinated menus, a rental house that required at least a deposit and a week's notice. The kind of spontaneous that takes 3 planning sessions and a group chat. And somehow I was supposed to believe it was a last-minute accident. I didn't reply. Later that day, I finally listened to Mom's voicemail. Her voice was soft, like she just finished crying or maybe wanted to sound like she had. "Alex, honey, I don't understand what's happening. I noticed the mortgage payment didn't go through this month. Are you okay? Did something happen with your account? Please call me. I'm worried. Not about me, though. Not about how I felt. Not about why her son might have stopped sending thousands of dollars in support every month. No, she was worried about her house, her routine, her comfort. She didn't even mention my birthday. It would have been laughable if it didn't hurt so much. That evening, Julia called again. This time, she didn't leave a voicemail, but she sent a text right after. "I didn't think you'd be this dramatic. It's not like we left you out on purpose. We just figured you'd be busy with your own thing. You're always working." That one hit different, not just because it was dismissive, but because it twisted the knife in exactly the way only a sibling can. Julia knew I worked hard. She knew I overextended myself to help them. And now she was weaponizing that against me, making it sound like I'd chosen to isolate myself. I finally replied, "You're right. I am always working. Working to keep this family afloat. Working to keep Dad's truck from getting repossessed. Working to keep Mom in the house she pretends she owns outright. Working to clean up every mess you make and then pretend didn't happen. So yeah, I was busy, but I still showed up. You just didn't notice." She read the message almost instantly. No reply. By the end of the week, the fallout had started. Mom texted again, this time with less sugar and more desperation. "Can you please send the mortgage payment? They're charging late fees now." Then, "Dad, truck companies threatening to tow. Don't make this harder than it has to be." I laughed bitterly when I read that one. Harder than it has to be. As if I'd created the problem by stepping away. Not that they'd caused it by leaning on me like a crutch they never planned to stand without. Then came the email from the bank. Julia's loan was being flagged for delinquency. Since I was no longer the guarantor, the remaining balance was now being accelerated. She either paid or defaulted. She emailed me again. "You didn't have to go nuclear. You could have just told me you were mad." I stared at my laptop for a while, just thinking, no, I didn't have to. But they didn't have to lie. They didn't have to exclude me. They didn't have to treat my kindness like it was owed. Every choice I made was the result of theirs. Every dollar I withheld was a debt they wrote in emotional ink over years of erasure. A few days later, I got a voicemail from Julia. No greetings this time, no fake cheer. Just okay. You made your point. That was it. Not "we're sorry," not "we messed up," not even "can we talk." Just that like the silence was punishment. Like this whole thing had been some petty tantrum. Like I hadn't swallowed disappointment my entire life until it became the language I breathed in my own family's house. And that's when I realized they'd never get it. Not really. They'd feel the consequences. They'd panic when the money didn't show up. They'd blame each other. Maybe even blame me, but they'd never actually understand the wound they carved open every time they smiled for a family photo I was never invited to be in. Still, part of me hoped, just a small wounded part, that maybe someone would finally see what I've been holding up for all these years, that someone would call just to say, "I'm sorry we hurt you." But instead, I got another message from Mom the next day. "We're not mad, Alex. We just wish you would have told us what was wrong before making everything so difficult. It's not like we don't appreciate you." That's when I knew I'd made the right decision. But I wasn't done. Because while I may have cut off the money, there was still something else they'd forgotten. And when they finally remembered what it was, what I still controlled, it would hit them even harder. That moment was coming. And this time I wasn't going to warn them. Not with a message, not with a call, just silence and consequences. A week went by with nothing but radio silence from me and a growing pile of increasingly panicked messages from them. I ignored them all. I didn't block anyone. No, that would have given them the satisfaction of thinking I was being emotional or overreacting. I wanted them to see the silence, to sit in it, and realize that for the first time in their lives, I wasn't going to clean up their mess. But while they were scrambling to patch up what I'd undone, I was doing something else, digging through files. See, it wasn't just the mortgage, the lease, and Julia's loan I'd been helping with. A few years ago, when Dad tried starting his little side business, some consulting firm that never got past the logo stage, I was the one who filed the paperwork. I was the one who set up the LLC under my name because, surprise, his credit was shot. He promised it was just a formality, that I could remove myself later, that he'd handle the finances, the taxes, the operations. He didn't. For 3 years, the business sat dormant. Occasionally, he'd get some side gig and run the money through the account, but most of the time it was just sitting there until it wasn't. Earlier this year, without asking, he'd used the business account, my business account, to apply for a small line of credit, $12,000. Not a fortune, but enough to raise alarms when I got the notice that a payment was past due. He must have assumed I wouldn't notice, that I just keep absorbing hit after hit like I always had. But I noticed, and I kept the receipts. So now, with everything else unraveling, I decided it was time to untangle that knot too. I contacted the state office, transferred the business out of my name, and notified the lender that I would not be responsible for any debts incurred without my authorization. I sent them documentation showing I hadn't touched the account in over a year, hadn't signed any of the loan paperwork, and was withdrawing my involvement entirely. That same day, the business account was frozen. And the next morning, I got a call from Dad. I didn't answer. Then I got a text. "Did you touch the business? I can't access the account." This isn't funny, Alex. Funny. That word again. Like this was a joke. Like my absence was some phase I'd get over. Like I was a moody teenager sulking in his room instead of a grown man who'd finally realized that his entire relationship with his family was a transactional illusion. I didn't respond. But 2 hours later, Julia showed up at my door. I live in a small house on the edge of town. Nothing flashy, but private enough that no one ever dropped by unannounced. So when I heard the knock and saw her standing there with sunglasses on and a Starbucks cup in hand, like this was just a casual catch-up, my stomach twisted. I didn't open the door. She knocked again, then texted me. "I know you're in there. Can we please just talk?" I waited 5 minutes before replying. "Nothing to talk about. You made your priorities clear." She stared at her phone for a moment, then typed back. "I didn't know you were hurting." If I had known, I cut her off. "That's the point, Julia. You didn't ask. You never do." She stood there for a while longer, probably hoping I'd crack, that I'd open the door and let her in, let her throw around a few half-hearted apologies, say she missed me, maybe even cry a little and wrap it all up in a neat little bow. But I didn't open the door. Eventually, she left. That night, I sat on the porch watching the wind pick up over the quiet street. And for the first time in years, I felt still, not happy exactly, but not waiting, not hoping, just still, until Mom called. And this time I answered. Her voice was calm, too calm, like someone trying very hard not to scream. "Alex, what's going on?" I didn't respond right away, just let the silence stretch. "Your father's furious," she continued. "He said, the business is locked, the truck people won't stop calling. And Julie is in tears over that loan. Are you seriously doing all this because we missed your birthday?" I almost laughed. "Because we missed your birthday." As if it was a dinner reservation. As if the birthday wasn't just the final stone in a wall they'd been building for years. "It's not about the birthday," I said. My voice was calm, measured. "It's about every year before it." "Alex," she sighed. "Families fight. They hurt each other sometimes. That doesn't mean you get to destroy everything. Destroy, I repeated. You think I destroyed something? All I did was stop fixing everything. You destroyed it yourselves. There was a pause, a long one. Then she said quieter, "We didn't mean to hurt you. I know I said, but you did anyway." She was silent again, then in a voice that barely held together. "So what now? Are you just cutting us off?" And that was the moment. That was the question, the cliff edge. Because I could have said yes. I could have hung up. I could have told her they were dead to me, that I was done forever. And part of me wanted to deserve to. But instead, I let the question hang in the air like smoke. Because what I said next would change everything. I sat there for a few seconds longer, holding the phone to my ear as her question echoed in my head. "So what now? Are you just cutting us off?" I took a breath. Deep, slow. The kind of breath you take right before you decide to break a cycle that's lasted a lifetime. "No," I finally said. "I'm not cutting you off. I'm just done carrying all of you." She was quiet. Not the sharp, stunned kind of quiet. The quiet where someone realizes you mean it. That you're not bluffing. That the scaffolding you've always held them up with has been quietly dismantled plank by plank. And now they're just dangling. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. My voice was steady and cold like water that had finally gone still after years of being churned up. I told her everything. That the mortgage payments were over. That the truck lease was now Dad's problem. That Julia's loan was in collections because she defaulted. And I had every right to remove myself as guarantor. That I'd withdrawn from the LLC and left them with a stack of consequences they'd never expected to face. "But Alex," she said, like it was some final card to play, "we're family." "No," I said with a finality that surprised even me. "Family shows up. Family includes you. Family doesn't ghost your birthday while smiling for matching shirts and lakeside selfies. You don't get to use the word family like a shield when it suits you." "You're angry," she said. "You don't mean all this." "I've never meant anything more," I replied. There was a long silence on the other end. Then the line went dead. She hung up. I didn't call her back. Over the next few days, the fallout spread like cracks in ice. Julia posted something vague and self-pitying on Facebook about entitled people who forget what family really means. And I didn't take the bait. Dad tried calling again, this time with a voicemail that was less yelling and more pleading, asking if I could at least make one more payment while they figured things out. No, that was the whole point. They'd had years to figure things out while I figured out how to juggle keeping my own life running while funding theirs in the background. And the worst part, they never saw it. They never noticed the sacrifices because I never made a show of them. I didn't wave bills in their face or remind them when their names were on the check I paid. I just did it quietly, repeatedly, until they started treating it like oxygen, something that would always be there, invisible and reliable. They didn't realize that even oxygen has limits. I got a letter in the mail a week later from the mortgage company. They were initiating foreclosure proceedings on my parents' house unless a payment was made within 30 days. I stared at the notice for a long time, remembering every holiday dinner I paid for in that house, every repair I covered, every late-night call where Mom cried and told me how stressed she was about bills right before turning around and helping Julia pay for new countertops. I folded the letter back up and set it on my desk. Then I did nothing. No calls, no transfers, no miracles save. Let them figure it out. Around the 2-week mark, I got a knock at the door. I opened it and there was Julia again, but this time no Starbucks, no sunglasses, no fake calm. She looked tired. Really tired, like someone who hadn't slept right in days. "I just want to talk," she said quietly. "Please." I didn't move aside, didn't invite her in. "Then talk," I said. She hesitated, then held out a manila folder. "These are all the loan documents. I've been trying to work with the bank. They said maybe if I could pay down a portion, they'd pause collections." I looked down at the folder but didn't take it. "I'm not co-signer anymore," I said. "That's between you and the bank." She looked at me like I'd slapped her. "Alex, please. I don't have the money. You know I don't. You've always helped before, and that's the problem," I said. She opened her mouth to speak again, but I cut her off. "You left me alone on my birthday, Julia. Not just physically, emotionally. You made a choice, and now I'm making mine." She blinked, tears rising. "I didn't think it would hurt you that much." I smiled just a little. "That's the worst part. You didn't think about me at all." She stood there silent as her shoulders started to slump. "So that's it. You're done." "I'm done being useful," I said, "being your backup plan, your ATM, your silent punching bag. But if you want to actually be my sister again, really, that's going to take more than a folder and a few tears." She nodded slowly, then turned and walked away, and I closed the door. A month passed. They lost the house not all at once, but the foreclosure went through. Mom and Dad had to move in with Julia temporarily, which lasted exactly 2 weeks before they were all at each other's throats. Dad's truck was eventually repossessed. Julia's credit took a nosedive. The bank froze what little she had left. And me, I was fine. For the first time in a decade, I wasn't hemorrhaging money on people who couldn't even remember to send a birthday text. I focused on myself, my business. I took a weekend trip alone to the same lake house I'd rented for my birthday. And this time, I didn't wait on anyone. I brought a book, grilled a steak, and watched the sunset from the same dock I'd once sat on in silence. Only this time it was peaceful, not lonely, just me, and it was enough. A few weeks later, I got one final letter handwritten from Mom. It was short, honest. She apologized, not with excuses, not with guilt tripping, just, "I'm sorry." She said she hadn't realized how much I'd been doing until it was gone, that she missed me, that she hoped one day we could talk. Not as a mother and her financial safety net, but as people who'd hurt each other and were ready to rebuild. I read it 3 times. Then I put it away. I wasn't ready. Not yet. Maybe someday. Maybe not. But I finally understood that I had the power to choose when and if that door opened again. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing their approval. I wasn't begging to be seen. I wasn't propping up a family that only remembered I existed when the bills were due. I was free. And that was the best birthday gift I could have ever given.